Hello and welcome to the second pick for this challenge. You may wonder, where did all the ships go? Well, I started working on that new chapter for the yearbook about assault frigates, and I realized that I need to test and update my knowledge about some of these ships, specifically at least the updated Ishkur, updated engines, and Nergal. And the rest would be pretty useful as well. And unfortunately, I just don't have the time to record a challenge in something like Incursus and then separately test feats for assault frigates. So I decided to just merge everything together and do this challenge for assault frigates for now. And once we are done with assault frigates, or at least with assault frigates I'm specifically interested in right now, we will go back to the larger bill. So we have 9 assault frigates. I removed the Hawk because we tested it in the last episode, and 8 assault frigates remain. So let's see what we get. Okay, this is actually very good. Um, if you are not familiar, Ishcore was pretty seriously rebalanced and updated. I don't remember the exact patch, but it became much stronger. If I remember correctly, it's now like one of the top assault frigates after Nergal, of course. I think it's Nergal, then Hawk, and when Ishkur is very close, third. And the style of many feats changed quite a bit compared to the previous iteration of this ship. So this is one of the ships that I definitely wanted to test and see how it performs and what feats are feasible. So I will cut the video here, I will play a bit in PIFA, and I will come back with a couple of feats what I want to test in this challenge. Okay, let's look at the feats. I looked at the kill boards of active players that use Ishcore, and I found a couple of reasonable feats that I adjusted for my liking. I will start with a blaster feat first, and then I will cover the rail feat as well. Let's get the obvious bits out of the way. So 3 neutron blasters, afterburner, web scrum, ADC. These are all obvious. I think you need afterburner in scrum range assault frigates nowadays, because they will almost always go against ships with scrum. So your micro warp drive is not gonna do much. The first big choice is between a small capacitor booster and a second web. I found that most people use something like this. They use a small cap booster in a medium slot when they use a newt, and the rest is kind of similar. I think it's not a very optimized way for a single rep feat, because in assault frigates they have sufficient capacitor pool and sufficient regen to fuel a single armor rep just fine, even if it's a permanent tank and not ancillary rep. And you just give up a lot of control to have like a stable capacitor, and I think it's not optimal. So what I decided to do is to use a second web, and then to use Nosferatu as like a backup source of cap. But even if you can't use the Nosferatu, the feat still works fine. it's a minute with a heated small rep, which is sufficient for the vast majority of fights that you will encounter in faction warfare. And by the way, another problem that I have is the newt in combination with blasters. I feel like, at least based on my experience, if you have a blaster feat, the newt rarely actually does anything, because if you fight in the optimal range, you always kill your opponent before, or you get killed before the single newt actually makes a difference on the capacitor. And if you fight outside of a newt range, for example, if you are scrum-kited, then the newt does just nothing, because you are outside of your optimal plus follow. So I think single newt with a blaster feat is not really the optimal way to fit these frigates. The second decision is whether you go with ancillary rep or a single armor rep. I found on the kill boards this is kind of split between people who use one or the other. I think in armor assault frigates you want the A-type rep because this is kind of the reason why you use armor assault frigates instead of shield assault frigates. Because you can have a permanent tank on the armor assault frigate pretty easily. But in the shield frigates, you will generally be capped by MASB charges. So if possible, I feel like A-type rep is preferred generally on the armor assault frigates. And the final solution is, and the final decision is between how do you plug your resist hole. There are two ways to do it. One is to use low slot resist module and DPS rig, and the other is to use max stop in the low slot and resist rig. Again, I found that many people use max stops, but I feel like, again, it's not very optimized way. What's the trade-off? If you use max stop and explosive rig, you get 10 more DPS, but you get worse control and worse tank, because the explosive rig drops your top speed. And I think it makes way more sense to sacrifice 10 DPS but get more control, because you really want control in a blaster frigate to utilize the DPS effectively. So this is the way I prefer to fit these frigates. And I want to very briefly comment on two other feats. I think they are feasible, but I am just not a fan of them. The first feat that you will see actually quite common is a small cap booster with double reps. I don't really like it. It makes a lot of sense in terms of bonuses of this frigate, but I think it's quite expensive for an assault frigate. And again, if you go against competent opponents, your control is just really bad. And if you get controlled, then you aren't gonna secure many kills. And this is just not my style, to sit and tank and hope that my opponent makes a mistake. I like to actually be able to secure the kills and not hope that my opponent does not know how to warp out. But generally it works, especially if you throw some implants and drugs on this can tank quite a lot. You can probably even go against like 2 opponents at the same time, which is pretty rare in close range frigates. And the final one is the feat that drops 1 gun for a newt, and when you have a cap booster here, I actually doubled with this feat a little bit many years ago with Talisman set. It kinda works, but the engagement profile is not very good. You only limited to ships that have that are vulnerable to cap warfare, and you really want to start fighting in position in this one because the control is again really bad. And in my case, I'm always going to be out of position, and it doesn't really work very well for these situations. So I will go with this one. And let's look at the rail feed next. I think with a rail feed there is really not much choice. If you go rails in Ishcore, then I think you must kite. The scrum range, I will show you the cookie cutter feed. The scrum range rail feed, I feel like it just doesn't work because Ishcore has a bonus to optimal range. And if you compare DPS of blasters with null at scrum range and DPS of rails with Navy antimatter and scrum range, there is really not that much difference. And half of your DPS, well, not half, like a third of your DPS is in drones anyway, but don't care about the range. So when you go with scrum range rails, you give up a lot of options for very, very little benefit. So I feel like you can just open PIFA and compare the applied DPS at like 8 kilometers of Blaster Ishcore against Rail Ishcore, and the difference will be almost negligible. And of course, if the difference is negligible at scrum range, you want blasters always, because you get way more options during the fight. So kiting, I think, is the only option, and the fit is pretty straightforward. Of course, you want the highest rails, the largest rails, 150 mm. Macro warp drive, cap booster. This fit doesn't work without cap booster, it's just too cap dependent. Warp disruptor, ADC, some kind of a rep. I think it's almost like you can use A-type, but I don't think it's quite realistic that you will need to permanently tank something. But like if you wanna throw extra 20 million, small A-type rep is fine, I guess. In the fourth medium slot, you can use a web, a defensive web, or you can use TD. I personally prefer TD because when you go against long-range Navy destroyers, you need additional mitigation with EWAR. And I found, again, it's just way more common to fight against long-range Navy destroyers than to fight against dangerous anti-kiters, where you may need a defensive web. So I think this one is the default, but I think I have a weapon cargo just in case. And really the only... Well, you probably need at least one polycarbon here, because you're a kiter and going like a kiting fit without any modules that enhance your agility and top speed is probably not the best idea. So probably only these two modules is something to talk about. You can drop nano and feed more tank, specifically plug the resist hole, explosive resist hole. This will be quite useful against drone ships that have warriors, but you will sacrifice quite a lot of top speed and quite a lot of agility. So this is, I don't know, I'm on the fence. I think nano is a bit more reasonable. And when this is essentially DPS rig, you extend your optimal range, and you can use higher DPS ammo at your effective range, which is about 24 kilometers. I think it's reasonable. Probably you can drop it for another polycarbon, I guess, or use maybe a DPS rig. In some cases, you may get a bit more applied DPS when with Locus, but I think this kind of makes sense overall. There are a couple of things that you may change slightly, but I think this generally should work fine. Okay, I will test these feats and record separate videos about the kiting Ishcore and about Blaster Ishcore, and I will show you the fights that I will get.